Hey everybody, it is Callihan for Nitromaniac TV's Wrestling Unlimited, coming at you from a snowbound and frozen Nitromaniac TV HQ. And just wrapped watching Impact Wrestling's Hard to Kill pay-per-view. And that went on January 12th, 2020 from the Bomb Factory in Dallas, Texas. And this is just my opinions of the card as a whole. And of course, it's been kind of a really busy weekend for Impact Wrestling, and also kind of a controversial one as well too, with the Tessa Blanchard controversy with the tweets and statements and so forth made public probably about 24 or 26 hours before the show was meant to air. I posted a poll on my Twitter at KellenNitro basically asking, does the statements and the tweets released about Tessa the day before the pay-per-view basically change the creative for the show at all? And 32% of you said no, not really. Tessa would win the title tonight. So let's run through the card and see indeed if that actually happened or not. So the opening contest was a very interesting affair where it had Madman Fulton of OVE taking on Ken Shamrock. And to me, on paper, this match was such a weird mix of talent between the two of them. But for an opening contest, it actually was really fun to watch. The match started out very technical. Fulton actually was, and I didn't know this about him, was he was actually an accomplished amateur, apparently. And of course, Ken Shamrock, his resume says it all for himself. And Shamrock has gotten a lot better, too. Since Bound for Glory. It looks like the guy can get back to working almost a submission style in the ring, and kind of like like a forerunner to like the same styles that we see like a John Gresham used in Ring of Honor or so, or just basically like an old shooter style, just a really old school style, which is a lot of fun to watch. Shamrock tries for a dive on the outside and is caught, but he fights out and does a German on Fulton. And I have written down at this point that this is a potential match of the night already. And Shamrock gets the submission via a shoulder vice, an old, wrestling shooter move almost from the 1960s or 70s. And the commentary saying that Fulton may have a broken shoulder off of this match. This was a very entertaining opener. 9:19 was the runtime on this. And yeah, this was a contender for match of the night, in my opinion. I really enjoyed this contest. This was, not so much high intensity, but just they kept it amateur. They kept it in the ring for the most part. A little bit of outside play with the Chris brothers on the outside, but they got tossed about 5 or 6 minutes into the thing. And Fulton's going to be main event talent maybe for these guys in the coming months or years in Impact. I think this is a perfect fit for him, and under this OVE faction led by Sami Callihan, I think Fulton's got enough potential here. He sure showed it in this match tonight. This was just a fantastic job, and Shamrock, man, he's getting better with age. He's, hey, 2020, we've talked about it before on this channel. These older athletes are coming back into the wrestling game, and they're showing up. So we go to the backstage and check out a video package of Rich Swann, quote unquote breaking, put in quotes, his ankle during the Bash at the Brewery event on, what was it, the Friday night prior to this. It's part of the storyline, I think, that they're working with Willie Mac. It's part of the storyline that they're working with his tag team partner Willie Mac, kind of a dissension storyline right now between the two of them. And, maybe even a little bit more to that. Maybe there might be some legit injury there with the ankle with Rich Swann, if he's on crutches and that stuff. Of course, it's pro wrestling, so you could be milking it. You could be not saying anything, could be quiet, could be out there. And, of course, this is the first Impact show I've watched in a while, so I haven't been following the product as religiously as some of you may have that have stumbled upon this video or such. So, either way, it's still some decent storytelling in this angle. So next match, it's for the X Division title. The champion Ace Austin will take on Trey Miguel of the Rascals. And so this program is based around the fact that Ace Austin is a sleazy heel and attempted to hit on Trey's mom at ringside after a match in the weeks leading up to this pay-per-view. Okay. Very interesting space flying tiger drop by Ace Austin to start. He's kind of his moveset kind of varies from week to week. It's kind of very early. You'll see him later on in the card, but of course RVD. Ace Austin is kind of along the same lines as a very early RVD in ECW and such, where this guy is constantly coming, almost like a Nova as well too, where this guy is constantly coming up with moves and different variations of moves and that stuff in matches. It's very interesting to watch this cat for sure. This match in particular was a very high intensity junior style match. Both these kids would be great in New Japan at like the Best of the Super Juniors or something. Maybe we can hope and keep our fingers crossed one day that they end up over there. A very close 2 count off of Ace Austin's Bangarama finish, and Miguel kicks out. Ace then hits a paper cut spot where he pulls out the little laminated Ace cards that he has in his equipment and such, and goes right in the webbing of Miguel's fingers and just cuts it right down the seam. A very cringeworthy spot. You see it sometimes in a lot of death matches and such. Great sequence after that of Can You Top This? Trey with a cheeky Nando's into a 619. That was the jaw-dropping maneuver, but Austin gets him off the top, off of the ropes, and it hits his finisher to fold after spinning toe hold grapevine. Like he was on the apron and it kind of ran into like a spinning toe hold around the arm almost, and you have to watch it to check it out. Wild, okay match with a very crazy ending. Post-match, Ace attempts to hit on Miguel's mom again ringside, and the fight is on. Rascals and Rhino Scum race out to separate them, so something brewing there. Again, like I said, an okay match, but that ending again, Austin's out there innovating, and just it's very similar to a Nova or a RVD from back in the ECW days, where you watch an Ace Austin match, you're probably going to see something you haven't seen before. So the runtime for that one was 12 minutes and 55 seconds, and again, Austin with the pinfall victory over Miguel to retain the X Division title. The Knockouts title was up next, where we had Taya Valkyrie, the champion, defend her title against Jordynne Grace and ODB. ODB, of course, fresh off of NWA TV, Power represent. We've already seen and heard from the Power contingent this weekend on independent events, with Nick Aldis crashing the Ring of Honor Center Stage event in Atlanta. Check your Twitter timelines and that stuff for information on that. Taya walking out with the Cruella de Vil themed outfit. Somebody's been watching Disney Plus lately. A nice looking knockout belt after a makeover. It makes it look more Access TV themed. Yeah, the X Division belt, the tag belts, the knockout belt, and the world title all changed, I guess, their colors and that stuff. They went from the blue background on the belt to a red background to kind of reflect more, because Access TV has adopted that red background in their logo. So it's kind of more of a company-wide type thing now that Anthem runs Access TV, and this is essentially Anthem's in-house wrestling organization, so therefore you're going to go with the company standard with the colorings and such, right? Didn't know about this, but it's 370 days and counting for Taya's knockout title reign. Yeah, it's a long reign for her since she won it at Homecoming last year, which was the first pay-per-view of 2019 for Impact Wrestling. It was a match, but it took a while, again, really to heat up. Double team Bulldog by Grace and ODB on Taya, though. It kind of picked up the pace, and the crowd popped really nicely off of that. There was some excellent chain wrestling and near falls. An amazing near fall off of a big splash attempt for Grace. Jordynne Grace hits the Grace driver on ODB, and Johnny Bravo distracts the ref just for enough time for Taya to throw Grace off of the pin to get the pinfall on ODB, and Taya retains the Knockouts Championship. Again, match, but day 371 of Taya's title reign will be tomorrow. And then the big statement was made after the match, as we found out that Taya, should Tessa Blanchard win, would love to be first in line, and in fact was throwing her name and her hat into the ring to be that number one contender for a Knockouts Champion versus World Champion match. Do we see that at their next pay-per-view, which will be Rebellion in April sometime, or, maybe even earlier than that? who knows? After a battery change for your humble narrator here, and basically no time at all passing on a pay-per-view at the end of the Knockouts match, we have RVD versus Brian Cage. And I'm not sure if I'm a fan of this RVD Katie Forbes softcore act where she can't keep her hands off of him, but it kind of helps with this heel persona. And you can kind of tell that RVD's always been like a relaxed dude. It's RVD, of course, right? It's not the super intense RVD. I think the only time we've seen that might have been maybe the One Night Stand pay-per-views back in 2005 and maybe a little bit in 2006 as well, when he was chasing the WWE belt. But this does add an extra dimension to his heel persona. Of course, he turned heel last year in Impact Wrestling, and they've been promoting him as such throughout the past few months or so, and this is just the latest variation, the latest dimension of this, if you will. New theme music for RVD. It's the first time I've heard it, at least. It's better than what they had before, but it's definitely fitting the gimmick at this point, as it's more kind of, booty twerking club type music for Katie Forbes and whoever the extra girl is and whatever to, shake their moneymakers to. But the RVD and Forbes act, like I said, is kind of cringe-worthy, in my opinion, just the way I'm looking at it. But I could see where it also adds another dimension to his heel persona. Cage walked out with a Diamond Machines hoodie, support for his longtime intergender tag team partner Tessa Blanchard in the main event. Hot start as RVD's girlfriend's girlfriend, that was Don Callis' words, that's not mine, distracts Cage and RVD gets to jump. And RVD hits Cage with the Van Terminator. Cage is busted open from the nose on down, and the ref all of a sudden makes the decision that Cage cannot continue. So running down from the back is Daga, and Daga will end up being the injury replacement for Brian Cage against RVD here. So it all of a sudden becomes RVD versus Daga, and so any thought of this being a dream match kind of out the window now. It's a young prospect in Daga who is one of the latest top-tier Mexican athletes that Conan has brought over to Impact. Now, we didn't know it at the time, but this was a way to get Cage out of Impact without beating him on TV. As he was an injury substitution, as Daga hit the ring to help him, right? The website SoCal Uncensored report, not the tag team, the website SoCal Uncensored, reports that Cage has signed a deal with AEW effective tonight, and we'll be making a debut with them soon, whether that's this Wednesday or the next pay-per-view or whatever. We will find out. But Brian Cage heading to AEW is a natural fit, I think. He knows a lot of the guys there, having worked with them in the Southern California independent scene in the past, and it's a natural. I think that he'll be a good fit there. Whether he decides to be a face juggernaut or a heel juggernaut, just book him as a juggernaut and you will be fine. Essentially this guy could be your Goldberg. So just go in there and just have him win short, concise matches and then save the long ones for the pay-per-view. That's how I would do it, at least. Anyway, the match restarts with Daga versus RVD. RVD eventually hits the 5-star frog splash for the 1-2-3. I don't know what we watched, but it was kind of a bleh type encounter. The RVD Daga match was only 4 minutes and 11 seconds. And, yeah, I mean, they made the best out of a bad situation there, potentially. Mind you, I don't think it was a bad situation, but I think they found a way where all parties could get away scot-free and not really have much damage. You have Cage jumping ship to AEW anyway. You have Daga having a strong showing on the pay-per-view, so, gives the rub to the young kid in the back. And you have RVD kind of continue his heel persona a little bit, in which that was probably what is going to be the desired effect in this match anyways, that RVD going over on Brian Cage. So the next match really picked up pace, though. This was Eddie Edwards versus Michael Elgin. The winner gets the Call Your Shot trophy and a title match for any Impact title of their choosing. So, they could go for the World Championship, they could go for the X Division title, or they could grab a partner and go for the tag team titles. Basically, it's like a universal Money in the Bank. And I have written down here, I like this Call Your Shot trophy as a title thing. Yes, I'd love to see this more happen across the line, even in WWE with the Money in the Bank. And as if I think that the holder of Money in the Bank should at least defend it a couple of times before they cash it in. I think that it adds value to the match, and it adds value to it as almost like a temporary title for that person. And I've always been a fan of that. So the match itself starts out fairly technical, but then they brawl to the outside. Elgin catches Edwards with a forearm from a dive for the ropes. That was kind of brutal. A super German suplex by Elgin on Edwards only gets a 2 count. A splash mountain bomb on Edwards only gets a 2 count by Elgin. Edwards, though, the finish of the match, reverses the buckle bomb and gets a free count, and he gets his trophy back. This match was amazing. I'd put it up there as a match of the night type contender. This one ran 1953, and it felt like a very decent 1953 or 20 minutes. It felt like a fun encounter for sure to watch. The next contest was the Spear versus Gore match. And this was Rhino versus Moose. And I didn't know it at the time, but apparently Spear versus Gore means no disqualification, as this was kind of under ECW-esque rules, where basically it was only pinfalls or submissions would be counted. The match starts hot with Moose connecting with the spear about 30 seconds in, but Rhino heads outside. A big backdrop on the ramp by Rhino. Rhino with a huge powerbomb through the table on Moose. Incredible action to open, but later on in the match, a huge Hail to the King Macho Man elbow by Moose from the top rope. His outfit, by the way, was very Randy Savage inspired tonight. It was very cool. I enjoyed it. That's an awesome ring outfit that he had on. A superplex through the chairs only lands a 2 count. Rhino hits the Gore through the table on Moose, but Moose pulls the ref in the way, so he and the ref goes through, and the replacement ref rolls in and only gets a 2 count for Rhino on Moose. But that allows Moose to hit the spear finally for a 1-2-3 while Rhino was arguing with the ref. I have this down this as well as a match of the night contender as well. Wow, yeah, it kind of picked up a little bit. It was good. Maybe not as good as the previous match with Edwards and Elgin. This one only ran about 13 minutes as opposed to, again, the 1953 that Edwards and Elgin had for the Call Your Shot trophy. But, both those matches back-to-back made I don't want to say embarrassment, but made kind of the stench of the RVD cage Daga thing kind of go out the window. So it made that bit of the show forgettable, and this bit was unforgettable. So kudos to those 4 guys for putting on 2 incredible matches. The Impact Tag Team titles were on the line next as the North takes on Willie Mac and ? Yes, that's right. Not the NWA ? Nobody, because Willie Mac walked out and said, listen, I'm not going to have a partner for this. This is going to be 2-on-1, and I'm going to win those tag titles myself, right? Mac says he's going alone in a pre-tape, and sure enough, the bell rings, and Mac is going in at it all alone. Mac attempts some offense, but the North proves to be too strong. Mac, though, got some momentum, but when he went for the 6-star frog splash, both Ethan Page and Josh Alexander countered it. However, later in the match, we saw a Doomsday Canadian Destroyer by Willie Mac. Are you kidding me? That was spot of the night. It was insane. And it allows for him to hit the 6-star on Alexander, but Page pulls the ref out and strikes him. The ref, though, doesn't call for the bell because of course, you can't win the title on a disqualification or a count-out. So Mac stops that from happening, but in turn gets caught by a left hand, and the match continues. The North retains the belts via what I deemed, there wasn't really a name for it, but I called it a strike party, and a tandem burning hammer. Great effort by Mac. Hell of a performance under the circumstances as well. And I guess when we went to the video package to hype the world title match at the top of the ramp, there was some more dissension between Mac and Swan, so they're kind of working towards that a little bit still. Again, no word to if Swan's injury will keep him out for some time, or if it's storyline, if it's real, or what it is, but we'll keep an eye on it, obviously, and by the time the next TNA pay-per-view runs around, or Impact Wrestling pay-per-view, force of habit. We will find out for sure, and we'll let you know. Well, you'll know before I know, but there we go. The next pay-per-view, of course, will be at Terminal 5 in New York City in April of 2020. The event will be called Rebellion. Kind of hilarious. They didn't announce a date. They just announced a month, so I think they're probably still trying to nail down the date there. But April 2020, Rebellion, Impact Wrestling. Then came the main event, and this was the one that a lot of people wanted to see. The Impact World title with Sami Callihan taking on Tessa Blanchard. With the match itself, let's talk about the match first, and then we'll get into the details after the match here of all the stuff surrounding it. The match kind of opened with a monster, I have down a monster Yakuza kick to open by Sami into the Cactus Special for 2. Tessa, though, fights back. She hits Magnum and gets it to a great tease, thinking that this match was going to end in 30 seconds or a minute. That would have definitely blown the doors off, and Twitter would have definitely blown up either way had that been, the case, right? Callihan working the leg after Tessa crashed and burned on the outside, so that would have been the story going through this match, is that, she hurt her knee on a dive to the outside, and that was going to be what they milked the match with, that Tessa was going to be fighting from behind with this sore knee. Powerbomb through the table as Tessa gets laid out. Tessa fights back, though, and hits the Magnum on the apron. Tessa then hits a third Magnum for only a 2 count. Callihan hits one of his stalwarts, kind of a pile driver-esque maneuver they calls the get out of here, but that only lands him a 2 count. Tessa then hits this is just a barrage of 2 counts at this point. Tessa hits a cutter and only lands 2. Callihan hits a sit-out powerbomb into a series of submissions, but Tessa fights for the rope and eventually gets it with her injured leg, in this match. And then Tessa hits a 4th Magnum and then floats over for a submission. No tap out there at all. A second Cactus Special by Callihan and only a 2 count. And for the finish of the match itself, 2 straight Canadian Destroyers by Tessa and a Buzzsaw DDT gets the pin on Sami. Finally, the runtime for that one was 23:49, and we have a new Impact World Champion, the first female World Champion in Impact Wrestling, in Tessa Blanchard. History made Tessa Blanchard as a World Champ and fade right to black, and the pay-per-view ends with a runtime of 2 hours and 52 minutes and 15 seconds for us who weren't in attendance. Now, for those who were in attendance, apparently Blanchard had a bunch of family in the building and that stuff, and they all hit the ring afterwards, and she made a statement, kind of loosely addressed the Twitter rumors and such, or the Twitter tweets, I should say, not rumors, the tweets that were made public on Saturday, and just loosely addressed them, and then basically kind of carried on with I'm a champion for the people type thing, and walked to the back. Personally, I would have looked at this. I would have looked at stuff that would have broke yesterday if I was Impact, and maybe put this angle and put this whole thing on maybe this shelf for a couple of weeks or so, 3 or 4 weeks, or maybe even do this at the next pay-per-view in April, just due to the fact that this was a kind of and it was an inopportune time at this point, to kind of pull the trigger on this, after yesterday. Now, whether those tweets are legit from people, which I would think that they are, this is a huge cross-section of people saying what they're saying and claiming what they were claiming, of course. I think that those probably speak for themselves. When you got enough people saying stuff about a person, chances are the majority of those people, and with no real history of those people being, con artists or liars in the past or whatever. I think that there's probably, where there's smoke, there's fire. So there's probably some, there's probably some validity to this. And so that being said, I would have personally had scrapped this angle going forward after this. I would have had Callihan beat Blanchard again tonight, and then maybe work with a different opponent going into April and that stuff. to the point where, if you wanted Tessa later on in the year to challenge again for that title or whatever, and, the environment had gone to the point where we found out what really went down in those situations and everything, then you have the full wherewithal and responsibility to say, hey, this is okay. We've done our due diligence. We've done all the, the studying, and we've talked to the right people and that stuff. And here's what we think. And if the conclusion comes that, hey, she did actually say these things, and she did, treat these people this way and that stuff backstage and whatever at past events and everything, then you can make your appropriate decision. By handing her the title right now, you kind of are pigeonholing yourself into a corner, or painting yourself into a corner, I should say, where you're kind of grouped in with this. So now she's your ride or die, and if the tightrope is very, very short and very flimsy, and she could fall 40 stories to her demise, you'll be going with her because you're strapped to her back like Yoda in the backpack, right? So it's like, it'll be something that's definitely newsworthy to sit back and just watch and see how this all shapes out, whether Tessa is going to be a long-term champion with Impact because of this, or if her title reign is going to be shortened by any stretch of the imagination or whatever. But in light of what happened, her declining any comments to media or that stuff, and not taking part of any of the extracurricular fan fest stuff that they were doing down there this weekend, I think where there's smoke, there's fire. So and plus, it was brought up to me in a few tweets tonight too from other people. What does that mean for her relationship and her potential dealings going to other places, i.e. AEW, or even with WOW, which shares the same network as Impact, or at least it did. And Tessa was a champion on WOW. What does David McLean think of this, going forward? So all these little factors and that stuff are all going to come together here over the next few months, and we'll see what happens. But for right now, Tessa Blanchard is the very first female Impact / TNA World Heavyweight Champion. And, it's history. It went down tonight. Whether it's good history or bad history, court of public opinion says one thing, and we'll wait and see what this all has to say. So I'll give the show a 7.5 out of 10. I think they dealt with the RVD thing almost, RVD, Brian Cage, Daga thing, almost perfectly, I would say, because again, it was a situation where all three guys got something out of that match, even though it was kind of scattershot throughout it. RVD got his heel character over a little bit, even though it still, to me, doesn't quite make sense. Daga came out and was very valiant in that as a babyface, and kind of established himself a little bit. I know who he is now, at least. And Brian Cage gets a chance to leave this promotion, which he kind of helped resurrect over the past year or so with his head held high, and jump over to AEW, which is great. Several matches of the night contenders here. I think to nail it down, I will have to go with Elgin and Edwards as that match of the night in that spot. I thought that it told a great story. I thought it was an awesome match. And, the controversy, surrounding the main event, historic moment, but, yeah, man, there's a lot of soul searching to do here with Impact, and where they go next, that's for sure. All right, folks, put your comments below. I know it's a very hot button topic. Thanks for sitting through this with me. I'm Callihan Nitro. Later days. Happy wrestling watching. We'll catch you next time on Nitromaniac TV's Wrestling Unlimited.